Good morning, everybody. Dan Thomas here for Weather School for Kids at home, as I've done these probably for 6 weeks now at home, but today it's completely different. It's outdoors. Thank you for joining, and thank you for playing along this morning. This morning's going to be very different. Again, we've been doing this for a month and a half to help kids who are being homeschooled, to help parents give them a break. And some of the parents actually like to watch these things. We've done so many weather lessons. We've talked about weather. We've done so many demonstrations, and today is completely different. So today is just going to be super chill, me outdoors in the back patio, and it's you driving the content. So anything you want to hear about, any weather questions you've had your whole life, you've never gotten the answer to, I'm with you for the next X number of minutes, however long this goes, to answer your question. So if you have a weather question, just type it, and I'll continue to sort of lean forward. Hello from Manchester, James Sturl. Hey, Amber, thanks for joining in. And we'll take care of those weather questions. You know, sometimes I'll get things started. Sometimes people ask me, what's the worst type of weather I've ever seen or been through? What's my favorite type of weather? A lot of people ask me about my palm trees. I'll give you a little palm tree tour if you're interested and tell you about those. Someone did pose on, I think it was Twitter, or maybe it was Facebook, because I advertised this last night, about the red sky at night, sailors delight, the red sky in morning, sailors take warning. Is that even true? What does that come from? What is that all about? And so I'll start by addressing that. That red sky at night, sailors delight, red sky in morning, sailors take warning, is a saying that's been around for thousands of years. In fact, it's actually in the Bible. I believe it's Matthew chapter 16, verses 2 and 3. If that's not right, it's pretty close to that. Check it out. There's a reference to it there, and with good reason, because back in the day, thousands of years ago, when there were sailors all over the place and there weren't people in trucks driving around, and they didn't have meteorologists at the local corner, they didn't have satellites and radars, they needed to look up at the weather to sort of figure out what was going to happen. And so the red sky, any color in the sky comes from the sun. It's sun's light, and the sun's visible light is actually all colors of the rainbow, but we don't see those colors until they're broken apart by the sun's light hitting something. And so we have the sun's light passing through our atmosphere, and normally the sun's light looks yellow, but when it passes through and it bumps into, or it gets refracted by or scattered by more little dust particles, we call those aerosols in the atmosphere, we can see some warmer colors. We can see some oranges and some reds. And so typically this happens in the mid-latitudes, essentially where we live, halfway up between the pole and the equator, and halfway down from the pole to the equator. It happens down there as well. In the northern hemisphere, our weather typically moves, not always, but typically moves from west to east. And so we talked during Weather School for Kids a whole bunch about pressure systems, air pressure. Air pressure is very, very important in weather. Areas of high pressure, that's sinking air that gives us nice weather. Areas of low pressure is categorized by rising air, and it gives us typically rainy or stormy or snowy weather. And so this is important in this lesson because with areas of high pressure, you've got sinking air, and it causes those dust particles and aerosols to sort of be pushed down close to the ground. So this is high pressure, which is nice weather. It gives us nice weather, starts to move in from the west late in the day. We know the next day is going to be nice, but also because of that sinking air, it's bringing in a little more dust, a few more aerosol particles. And as the sun gets low in the sky, the sun's rays bounces into a lot more of those dust particles, and the sky looks red. Now when high pressure moves away in the morning sometimes. If high pressure moves away, that means low pressure is probably going to move in behind it to compensate. And again, low pressure is a storm. So if high pressure with all those dust particles is moving away in the morning, and then we see the red sunrise because the sun's rising in the east, well, moving in behind it, behind that departing high pressure system is going to be some storms or some rain. It doesn't always work that way, and sometimes you can see a red sky. Well, we don't have high pressure building in, but typically back in the day of just the sailors, before the trucks and the trains and the planes and all that stuff, that was a good way to indicate a lot of times if it was going to be stormy. Red sky in morning, sailors take warning. So I hope that helped. All right, Jorge says good morning. Karen is watching, and let's see if we have more questions. Jorge is in South Nashville. Amber loves palm trees. Me too. I love them. James, good morning to you. You know, I'll also sometimes get questions about the worst weather I've ever been through. And so there's a number of times in my life when it's been freaky and frightening. No kidding, I've been doing this. Someone asked me at the station the other day, hey Dan, how long have you been, because they want to figure out how long we've been meteorologists. How long have you been a meteorologist? I've been a meteorologist, so I graduated college 26 years ago. It's crazy to think about. And in all that time of my life, you know, through college and beyond, and even before that when I was a kid, I have never seen with my own two eyes live a tornado. I've been real close to tornadoes. In fact, the tornado that hit downtown Nashville started no more than 3 miles from my TV station. When I was back in the Air Force in 1999, there was a tornado that hit my base, but I was too busy on the radar and talking to the colonel who ran the base to go outdoors to see it. And so by the time I finished all my work, I started to walk outdoors. The weather observer, the guy who would go in and out and look at the sky and make observations and tell the airplanes what was going on, he said, sorry, Captain, the tornado's gone. So I missed it. So close. But some of my worst weather that I've ever dealt with, you know, we had that terrible wind event probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, that derecho, and winds were probably 80 miles an hour with that. When I was a kid, when I was in high school, probably in 9th grade, my father and my brother and I were driving alongside a lake, and a collapsing thunderstorm caused a microburst over the lake. And I remember just driving along. We had no idea this thing was coming. And I looked out and I just saw a wall of white over the lake. And I thought to myself, that doesn't look too good. And then it hit. And then so that microburst blew across our car. My guess is I've looked at observations from that day, and a local airport probably 3 miles away had winds about 80. My guess is because we were near that lake and there's very little friction, we probably gusted to 85, maybe close to 90 miles an hour. For about 10 or 15 seconds, it was probably the most terrifying weather experience I've ever had, and it blew down probably 20 trees in our path that we were trying to get home from. We were trapped, and actually by the time we got to an area where we were stuck, there was a super strong guy who actually removed some tree debris out of the way and we could get by, but it was just nuts. But as a child, seeing that and being right next to a lake and seeing it come across the lake and then hit your car and the car is trying to almost roll over, it was unreal. I've been through Hurricane Katrina, and so that was nuts. You know, obviously I went through the tornado. We'll talk about the tornado back on March 2nd and 3rd in a minute. But Hurricane Katrina, I lived in New Orleans years ago, and back in the, I guess, early part of 2003 to 2006, I lived down in New Orleans. And I dealt with so many tropical storms and hurricanes down there then. Katrina hit in August 2005. And, you know, you train for these sorts of things in school. You read the meteorology textbooks, so you look online and you see some of the study guides online. And you learn about storms in college like Hurricane Katrina, but then you're at a TV station. I worked for NBC down there, and you see it coming toward you. And so it's just unreal. So the storm hit the coast on a Monday. It was like August 29, I believe, 2005. Hit the coast of Louisiana on a Monday at 6 a.m. But the preceding Saturday at 4 o'clock, I remember the winds with Hurricane Katrina were 175 miles an hour. It was unreal. And it was just a couple hundred miles from the coast. And I knew what 175 mile an hour winds would do. If it didn't weaken, it would dismantle a lot of properties. It would take apart a lot of houses. In fact, almost most houses that weren't well constructed. So it was a little frightening in that regard. And so my news director came in to that station, WDSU down there, and he said, hey, listen, everybody listen up. Let's have a meeting. I want you to send an email to or a text message to or call essentially all your friends and family and say, hey, this may be the last time you hear from me for a very, very long time, because we expected to lose power for God knows how long. And so that's Saturday at 4 p.m. And then he selected me as one of the lucky people to stay behind and say, he said, hey, you know, we're going to evacuate most of the station, but I want you and just a few other people to stay behind with the storm until this thing blows on through. And so as a meteorologist, I didn't have a family down there then. I didn't own property then, so I didn't own a home. I just rented an apartment. I just had fish. I had nothing to worry about. So I was excited to be able to go through that. And so that night, so he gave us the option, those that stayed behind, he said, hey, you can go stay in that, you know, creaky old hotel across the street, or you can go stay in the Superdome, which is where the New Orleans Saints, it's an old football structure where the New Orleans Saints play their NFL football. And neither one sounded good to me. So a bunch of buddies and I, and who's the lady who's now my wife, Deanna Lambert, used to work for News 4. We went to a different hotel, which is on the river, and we got a room probably on the 11th floor. And I remember checking in that Saturday night to the hotel, and so we stayed there a couple of nights. And I got into my room, 10th or 11th floor, and I was on the phone with my sister, and I said, "Hey, hold on 1 second, Maureen, hold on." And I paused, and I could already hear the hotel creaking. Again, 10th or 11th floor of the Hilton Hotel down on the riverfront, New Orleans. And the hotel was already creaking as the wind started to pick up. Maybe this is Sunday night. So 8 hours before the storm hit the coast. And then 4 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, this is Sunday night. 4 o'clock in the morning, Monday, 2 hours before landfall. I woke up, and the others with me woke up who were in the room, and I said, "Hey, do y'all hear that?" You could just hear the wind howling nonstop outdoors. And the reason we woke up is because the beds were beginning to shake. So the beds would occasionally shake as the entire hotel vibrated in the unbelievable wind. So at that point, we just said, "This is nuts. We're way upstairs, 110 feet up. We've got to get downstairs." And so we went downstairs to the base of the hotel, and we told the National Guard, who was in the hotel running the operation with the hotel management. We said, "Hey, we're with a TV station. We've got to stay near these picture windows so we can watch this storm and do a news story." And because they were funneling just about everybody else into the conference room. So the National Guard let us do that for about an hour. So I watched, and I just could see just downtown New Orleans as these amazing wind gusts were coming down, funneled through the buildings. So they're funneled through the buildings, they accelerate, the wind gets stronger. And I saw one of those big, tall, metal trash cans. It's probably 3.5, 4 feet tall, probably 3.5 feet tall, big metal drum trash cans go flying through the air. And it went flying through the air like it was a piece of paper. It was unreal. We got through the storm, and thank God for that. And then it was probably 24 hours later when the floodwaters reached downtown New Orleans. And so those that remained behind, there were probably, a dozen of us. My general manager stayed behind, my news director stayed behind, and they just said, "Let's get out of here because the waters are coming in." So we had a caravan that was one way out of the city. We left New Orleans, and I never went back for 2 full months. So I went right to Jackson, Mississippi. Our sister station up there allowed us to broadcast a little bit remotely from there. And then I spent most of my time down at the NBC station in Orlando, Florida, broadcasting via satellite to our viewers back in New Orleans for 2 months. And then I came home, and that was the beginning of my transition back to somewhere else. And I moved to Nashville, and I love Nashville. My family loves Nashville. Okay, Chuck Lardy. Dan, can a waterspout cross water, go on land, and become a tornado? Great question. Absolutely so. Those are just names. So, waterspouts, typical waterspouts that form, and that's essentially a tornado over water. If it's not like with a supercell thunderstorm, and usually it's not, they're just little spin-ups that happen over the water, but sometimes they move ashore, and as soon as it hits dry land, it's called a tornado. It may not last very long because it forms differently from the way like supercell tornadoes form, but it can do a ton of damage, and sometimes people at the beach are mesmerized by these things, and they get too close, and it's not good. Umbrellas can fly away. I've actually seen, you can Google the landfalling waterspouts or just waterspouts along the coast and see, like, I don't know, kids in those inflatable jump around things, and then they just get lifted up, So they can easily have winds up around 100 miles an hour, and you see a waterspout coming, you got to get away. But yes, as soon as it crosses the land, it becomes a tornado. Good question. Okay, let's see. Tornado. Okay. So let's talk about the March 2nd and 3rd tornado. Obviously, I went through that. I was at News 4 on TV that night and into the morning. It was like a 16-hour shift. It was crazy. And was that my worst ever experience? We weren't directly hit by that at News 4. Here's the thing. I've been doing it. I've been doing this for years. And so I've been through hundreds of tornado warnings, easily hundreds of tornado warnings. My first tornado warning that I ever covered was at my first television station back in 2000 in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Because that was my first one, I wasn't on autopilot. I was thinking about everything I was doing. And when you think about everything you're doing, there's a lot more emotion in it, if you will. And I almost got emotional on TV. You know, it was hard for me. The March 2nd and 3rd tornado in Nashville was probably my 857th tornado warning. I don't know, I'm making that up. But it's sort of like an emergency room doctor who sees emergency room patients come in night after night, week after week, year after year, and you're essentially, you flip on autopilot. And so it just seems surreal. You know, this thing is chewing up Davidson County to start, and it didn't seem real, but I knew it was real. And so it's just autopilot took over. Like hours passed, and it was like a flash because my body just took over. It knew what to do, and I didn't think about it a whole lot and what it really meant until it got close to Mount Juliet. When it got close to Mount Juliet, we've got some good friends who live over there, and I thought to myself, yikes, this is pretty close to their house. And then it became even more real. But now that I step back and I can pause and think about what happened, you know, that night, it's just incredible. But because I was a few miles away from the circulation, it didn't directly hit me. And so I've got to say, like, Katrina probably was the worst weather event I've ever been through. I went through, you know, those weather enthusiasts, the adults on here right now, who know a bunch about tornadoes, know about the May 3rd, 1999 tornado, the one that hit Moore, Oklahoma. It was an F5. And then the Doppler on wheels, it's like a little miniature radar, research radar, was pretty close to this thing. And so I guess some students from the University of Oklahoma, some faculty was out there pretty close to it, and they clocked on their radar about 100 feet off the ground, winds at 318 miles an hour. That night, May 3rd, 1999, I was in Oklahoma, and I was in the town called Enid, Oklahoma, which is Vance Air Force Base. That's the night that I just told you about at the beginning of this, where there was a tornado also on my Air Force base. And I couldn't get outdoors quickly enough to see it. So I've been through that, but I have to say that Hurricane Katrina really took the cake in terms of crazy weather for me, even though I went through May 3rd from a distance. Danny White is listening from Lewisburg. Thank you, Danny. Who else has a question? Who else has a weather question? Kids and adults alike watching right now. Okay, Paula, she says, I'm getting in late on the conversation, but I was just wondering, I remember back in the day, if there were tornado warnings, we were all told to raise the windows in the house. I haven't heard that in a while. Good question. Yeah, we used to do something called Surviving the Storm at News 4, and I honestly hope we do it again. I hope we start it up again. We might, but we would go visit various towns. Let me just tilt the camera a little bit. We'd go visit various towns in cities and talk about different weather phenomena, and we would cover this, and essentially is you don't want to lift the windows. You know, they used to say back in the day, raise the windows of your house to equalize the pressure between the indoors and the outdoors if a tornado is coming, if there's a tornado warning. But I learned in school that you don't do that, because if a tornado comes along and it wants to open the windows, it will open the windows for you. And so typically what happens when a tornado strikes, you know, we've seen videos of this. Essentially, if it's a direct hit and it's a big tornado, the first thing that's going to happen is that sort of like the airplane, the Bernoulli effect, it's called, the winds go over a roof really fast, and so fast that eventually a section of the roof will come off, and the windows will break from flying debris. And so sometimes the upstairs windows will break, and that will fill the upstairs with some wind, and that will help the roof to come off. But once that happens and these windows start to break, then some walls start to come down. And most often the tornado is gone by that point, because tornadoes, unless they're enormous, don't last very long. You can hear them for a long time. You can hear them coming and going, but the most intense circulation doesn't last more than a few seconds in most cases, unless it's super big. So by that time, most cases, the tornado's gone. But lifting the windows, it's just going to allow more junk to fly in and stuff to blow around in the house. So great question. Paula, thank you for that. All right, I'm reading Karen's question. Since radar picks up tornado action in 2 to 3 minute rotations, how often may tornadoes not be registered or observed? Absolutely, happens probably more often than we know, Karen. You know, so tornado numbers have come up over the years, observed tornadoes. Hey, there's been more tornadoes over the last 10, 20, 30 years, whatever. I don't know what the statistic is, but if we did some research on that, that's what we would find, I'm sure. And part of that is because we have more eyes in the field. Part of that is we have more people paying attention with cameras. And so you could just know what's going on. But, when the area that we live in was a lot more sparsely populated, there probably were a lot of tornadoes too, but people just never were around to report them. So the radar scans, the radar, just essentially it's a dish that sends out energy that bounces off of precipitation and things, and it comes back to the radar and it goes off to a computer, makes a little picture, and we can see where the rain and storms and sometimes the tornadoes happen to be. If it's a tornado that's on the ground for a minute and the tornado scans close to the ground once every few minutes, you're going to miss that sometimes. So it definitely happens. Great. You're welcome, Paula. Happy to help. Let's see if there are any other questions here. I've had so much fun doing these Facebook Lives. I tried to come up with another weather experiment that we haven't seen. Just weather is only, as I said a number of times, weather's only so broad. I tried to make, and I almost got it going the other night, something called hot ice. I don't know if you've ever tried this. You need vinegar and baking soda, and then you have to boil the concoction to make sodium acetate as a result of that, and then you can chill it and then pour it. It makes a big, tall tower of hot ice. I bought all this. I got so much vinegar in the house, so much baking soda, it just did not work. So I said, you know what? We're just going to do a question and answer session today. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just say we are going to wrap this up. If you have additional questions, you know where to find me, dthomas@wsmv.com. You can get me on Twitter all the time. It's WSMV Dan Thomas. And on Facebook, it is Dan Thomas WSMV. Lisa's off the next couple of days, and so I'm filling in for her this evening from my back porch, my back patio. Oh, I just like my palm trees, so I'll just show them to you real quick. You can see them right over there. So there's one, there's another, there's a third, and there's a fourth. That's actually not even a palm tree, but this one over there definitely is. That one was so tiny. I don't know if you can see it. It's about 6 feet tall now. That thing would fit almost in a shoebox when I bought it at a palm tree farm in Alabama, in Montgomery, about 11 years ago. So I've just been watering it and taking care of it and bringing it in. But that will be on TV with me later today. So thanks for watching. Again, News 4 at 4 o'clock starting this afternoon. I'll be outdoors, and we'll talk about Memorial Day weekend weather. Have a great day. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for choosing News 4. Take care.